Hello, hello, hello. This is Adrienne Berg, and this is The Ageless Traveler. And I'm very happy today to present to you something new. At least it's something new to me. And that is camping light. No, it's not camping heavy. No, it's not glamping. It's something different. It's camping light. And I got those words from Kenney Enney, who is one of the proprietresses, the Enney Ranch and Coyote Flats where I stayed, because this is a very unusual Airbnb. Now, we are not a camping family. My 9-year-old son, who's now 42, was once asked, "Did you ever go camping?" And he very gracefully said, "No, but I did once go to a hotel that had no room service." So that's us and camping, you understand. And yet, I had the experience of a lifetime. And it was such a surprise to me that I had to have Kenney Enney with us today. He is a rancher. He's also part of the whole Airbnb, a spectacle that we all know about that's just exploded already. But what he offers is not the usual type of accommodations, but a very special thing which has been called, and I think it's true, camping light. So let me introduce you to Kenney, and let me also introduce you to the experience. Thank you, Kenney, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So this is going to be a lot of fun. First of all, let's start with where I stayed. I stayed in a tent. It was already made up. It had a beautiful bed. It had great accommodations. It even had a little, very primitive way of going to the bathroom, very private, your own barbecue, anything you could think about. But it was situated on your ranch. It was called Coyote Flats. How many of these camping sites or camping light sites do you have, and how did you think to do it?
We have 4 sites total. When I got out of the Marine Corps and moved out here, I focused mostly on cattle and grain. I started doing the camping light to accommodate wounded warriors. This is how I first got into it. I built a small cabin basically for wounded warriors to come. And one of the wives one day said, "Well, why don't you rent these out?" And having been a career Marine, I did not understand why somebody would want to go camping either. I really didn't take it seriously, but I started looking into it and realized there was a demand for it, primarily because when you go camping in the state or national parks, it's very controlled, it's very crowded. And so I looked for an experience where you were somewhat isolated, but not to the point where you felt afraid. And then also primarily you didn't have to pack up all your stuff and set it up. So those were kind of the 2 things that drove the idea.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the wonderful location. Let's talk about that. You will see from our Travel Tuesday newsletter that a couple of issues are going to be focusing on the California coast. It's such a beautiful wine area. You're in the middle of wine country on the Enney Ranch. There you're in the middle of cattle country. And I stayed in one of the beautifully named tents, and it's called Coyote Flats. And indeed, one of the great experiences, and you may not even know this, Kenney, because you live there, is the sounds. I was woken up by a beautiful mooing sounds of the cattle, which you can see, but you're very safe from them. During the night, I heard the coyote sounds. I heard jackrabbits in the bush, and the birds, of course, were just amazing. So you are having a feeling that you're in the wilderness or you're outdoors. But you can see city lights. You can see Paso Robles lights from there. It's beautiful. And you can see 1 or 2 of the other tents. So if you want to go with the family members, you can actually get together for the barbecue. So that's what I wanted to ask you. Who had the idea, the brilliant idea of doing the barbecue and having that available? Got a lot of amenities there. Was that you? Was that Sharon? Or did it just evolve?
That was me. I really wanted everything to be self-contained. I did want things a little more isolated. Originally I didn't want you to have to see another campsite if you didn't want to. And it's kind of
See, I like that. I'm going to interrupt you. I liked that because the tents are for 2 people. But if you're bringing another family member, like I want to bring my adult kids, they're in their 30s. Right. It's great because you make a party out of it. But go ahead.
A lot of people do that. A lot of families show up. I think at Thanksgiving, we had a family that booked all 4 sites. So there's a barbecue pit or a barbecue. There's a fire pit. You have a private bath area with the cattle trough tub, hot and cold water. It's drinkable water, ice chests, lanterns, light strings, chuck box with all your camp or cooking and eating utensils. And then we give you some coffee, tea, oatmeal, and stuff for the morning. Usually have, depending on the season, fruit off the trees, fresh baked bread, stuff like that for the morning. But having been in the Marine Corps for 24 years, the things that I didn't like were sleeping on the dirt and not having a hot breakfast and not having to wash with cold water. And so those were kind of the three things that I made sure everybody had: a comfortable bed, hot water, and food for the morning.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the ranch itself. That morning that I woke up, I found you and Sharon actually baking bread. You were up very, very early in the morning. You showed us the wheat fields, the cattle we had already seen. So tell us about that wheat, because that was a surprise to me. I'm very used to associating that area of the world with wineries and not with wheat growing.
Well, historically, this had always been grain country, 20 miles north, Steinbeck country. But John Steinbeck grew up in Salinas. And if you read East of Eden, it talks a lot about the grain that was grown in the Salinas Valley and the cattle. And it wasn't until refrigeration came about that you started to see the vegetables. And so we're on the Salinas Valley, but we're at the upper end of the Salinas Valley. And so it's hotter, not as much rainfall. But historically, if you go into Paso Robles and in San Miguel and Templeton and Atascadero, you can see all the old granaries from the 1900s. So grain was pretty predominant here, really up until 1980s probably. And at that point, my research tells me that it was probably NAFTA that killed off the grain industry here. And so people started looking for the next crop, which was grapes. And so grapes really became big here beginning in the 90s. And if I remember the story correctly, you had phylloxera, which is that virus that affects grapes, wiped out the crop in Napa. I think it was 92 or 93. And one of the wineries in Napa made a wine with grapes from Paso and won a big competition. Now, that kind of put Paso on the map for wines at that point. So then everybody started buying up the land and planting vineyards. The impact of that was the grazing land for the cattlemen. Also started shifting, those people that had been growing barley, which was predominantly the grain that was grown here, started selling off their land to vineyards. And I think you're seeing the end of another cycle now, because unfortunately now you got a lot of winery or vineyards that are going up for sale just because of the glut of grapes. But I started out growing barley the same way everybody else did. And I realized at that point in the world, being a small operation, I was never going to be able to make a living doing that because I'm competing against all the grain farmers around the world. So I figured, I can't be big, so I have to be different. And so I shifted from feed barley to malting barley and went to Canada to learn how to malt and got certified as a maltster. And so I'm one of, I think, only 3 maltsters in California right now.
Wow, that's a huge difference. I work a good deal with the United Nations, and there's a wonderful documentary, and I'll put that in the show notes along with how you get to the Enney Ranch and along with how you can be part of this wonderful camping experience. You'll see that in the show notes. But I'll also put in this documentary. It's about an Indian woman whose foundation saves ancient grain seeds because these ancient grain seeds are being owned by very big companies. In other words, the seeds themselves are almost patented, even though they're ancient natural grains. And small farmers and people can't get their hands on it, particularly if they pollute them in some ways. And so we're losing that. Now, when I asked you about breaking bread, the reason I'm talking to you about this, Kenney, is when I asked you about bread, you said, well, we're using ancient grains. Give us your background with regard to that.
So when I did all my grain research, I also wanted to plant wheat here. And all the old timers told me that you can't grow wheat in Paso Robles. And what happened, back to your story about the woman rescuing the seeds, that is a big movement because a lot of the seed stock, the heritage wheats and heritage grains prior to World War II are disappearing. And so there's a school of thought that says that those people that have developed food allergies and gluten intolerance, that's the result of the hybridization of wheats post-World War II. And that was done with good intent. And the intent was to basically feed the world in the aftermath of World War II, because you had a lot of starving people and a lot of infrastructure that was destroyed. But nobody ever thinks about the secondary and tertiary effects of those things. So I spent about 5 years, and I'm still doing it, going around and collecting up heritage wheats that were not hybridized. And so these were wheats that would have done fine around here back prior to World War II, but they weren't as profitable. And so World War II is kind of a shift where farms went from small family farms to industrial farms. And so the grains were bred specifically for that. The infrastructure was set up specifically for that. So the wheats that we grow are all non-hybridized. They're pre-World War II. Some of them are old American varieties, like hard red wheat called Turkey Red, which was very common in the Midwest, Kansas area. Another one is Sonora White, which was the first wheat. It's a soft white wheat that was brought by the Spanish to the Americas in the late 1500s, early 1600s. There's another one that's a derivative of that, which is a South African wheat. But these are all wheats that can produce a crop with 12 inches of rain or less, which is what we get here usually. Most modern wheats, you're going to need 15, 16, 17 inches of rainfall in order to get a crop. And it's just because they've been bred for that. So all the wheats that we grow right now, it's probably hopefully going to change this year, but right now we've basically been selling it online, and we're going to probably start selling it locally, and we just mill it for flour. And, the flavor, I think, is much better. It makes for a denser bread, which I'm not sure people are used to, but it's all whole grain. So it's got all the nutrients. It's still supposed to be in the grain and stuff like that.
Well, it's wonderful. We have some keto breads that we use here, and also gluten-free breads. And so we are used to the dense breads. But of course they're packaged, they don't have the flavor. So this is really something very special. And to wake up in the morning and see people baking the bread makes such a difference to me as a tourist, as a personal experience. Now we're going to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, I have a few questions to you about Airbnb itself. I have a few questions for you that I was not going to ask. But now, what about your area? What's it like to live there? We'll be talking about that in just a minute. And I do want to tell everybody that not only on our show notes will we be directing you to the Enney Ranch and to Coyote Flats and some of the tenting experiences, but this idea of bread is very important. There's a wonderful biblical saying, without bread, there is no learning. And you have to have the bread first, and then your mind can be clear to learn. So you'll also see one of our former podcasts called Italian Wannabe, about a fellow from Pasadena, actually, California, who went to Italy, and he baked bread. And it's a beautiful documentary, but it's really complimentary to you and your kind of philosophy of life. So don't you guys go anywhere. We're going to eat bread and we're going to philosophize at the same time. For many years, I had a radio call-in show, almost about 20 years. I'm very used to hearing your questions and answering them. And if I can't do that, I have a battalion of experts who can. Do you have questions about travel, about volunteering, perhaps just about volunteering, or even your next step in life after retirement? Well, if you have those questions, please ask Adrian. Very simple to do it. Go to fanlist.com/agelesstraveler. That's fanlist.com/agelesstraveler. You'll see it in the show notes. And ask me by text, by voicemail. It's free. We will get back to you. And if we get enough questions, we'll start to live stream and you'll be able to ask me on the air. fanlist.com/agelesstraveler. And now we're back. And let me reintroduce you. I am Adrienne Berg. I'm the host of The Ageless Traveler. We're here to illuminate new ways for you to travel. We're actually talking about camping light in California, on the beautiful California wine country. Kenney Enney, who is a rancher. He is a connoisseur of malted barley. He's a connoisseur of cattle ranching. And he's a connoisseur of Airbnb. But he's not by himself. He has a fabulous wife, Sharon, who supports in every way, and she's just a wonderful person to be part of the Airbnb family and part of this new family. I won't even call it Airbnb, but the family where you extend graciously parts of your home to other people. So let's talk about that just for a minute.
I started doing this in early 2019, and I'll have to say it was a bit of a challenge getting all the permits through the county. It was primarily because I was doing something that nobody had done before. There were a couple other ranchers that had campsites on their property, but they weren't doing it by the book. And I was the idiot that decided I was going to follow the rules. And it was a challenge, but eventually, I was able to get all the permits. But I had to basically go and do the research on how to do it because the county's answer was just no. Now, what was going on at the same time is you did start to have a lot of concern in the older part of Paso that a lot of houses were being bought up and turned into rental properties because there's a shortage of hotel space here. And so I could understand, I was very sympathetic to families that one had to live next to a potential party house. I was very sympathetic to the young families around here who, can't afford to buy a starter home. So out here, I have no neighbors. My closest neighbor is 3 miles away. My rule is if I hear you, you're too loud. So back to your point, I want to hear the cattle. I want to hear the coyotes. I want to hear the owls. And if you're a fraternity house from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, I'm not going to allow you to come up here and have a party. If you're a family and you want to have, a quiet camping experience and look at the stars and be, unplugged from modern society, you're more than welcome. It's been a very positive experience, and I've enjoyed meeting different people like yourselves, and had lots of international travelers. I've got 2 guys from Jordan that are on their way from San Francisco to LA for the World Cup. They're going back and forth up and down the Pacific coast for World Cup events. Lots of South Africans, lots of Asians, Indians and Chinese, lots of Australians, lots of Europeans, lots of South Americans. So it's fun. And having traveled myself, been, warmly greeted in many countries around the world, I like being able to give back a little.
So you can tell your folks coming from Jordan, I said that we never camped until we found you, but that's not true. I actually camped in Jordan. And that is something that is extremely popular there because the Bedouin community has wonderful tented areas. They're like you, they have those little lights outside at night. It's magical. And they have a tent that's the communal tent. So you eat there, you eat with everybody. And generally, by the way, it is barbecue. It's their type of barbecue, but it is barbecue. And my husband and I have enjoyed tenting in Jordan. So you tell your folks that you just were on a radio show and they mentioned exactly that. So the world is very small and people can get along if they only gave it a little chance. Okay, so now I want to talk about the cattle. Because it's a cattle ranch. Look, we talked about some of the ancillary things, the Airbnbs, the bread, the barley, and so on. But really, it's a cattle ranch. And that's, to me, a big undertaking, a bigger undertaking than anything else you've mentioned. So I'm not sure. Tell us about that experience.
So the ranch is 850 acres. And when I bought the land, I was a captain going through Naval Postgraduate School and Defense Language Institute. Got a master's and then went down to South America as a military advisor. But that's when I bought the land, and there were no vineyards out here. There were 2 or 3 big ranching families, the Work Ranch, the Ernst Ranch, and the King Ranch. And that's all they had done for generations, probably since the 1850s, 1860s. And each of those ranches, some of those ranches are still tens of thousands of acres. I bought from the Ernst Ranch, which has pretty much been broken up. What we do is a cow-calf operation. And so essentially out here, we can run a pair, a mother and a calf. We can run a pair on about 25 acres. We could probably get 40 to 50 pair of cattle out here. And concern is always overgrazing. Since, it's a Mediterranean climate, you never know whether you're going to have enough rainfall or not. Right now, we got 35 pair of cattle. And so we bring them, we bring a bull in, usually in the right after they calf, usually in September timeframe, September, October, after the heat of the summer is usually broken. Bring a bull in, leave the bull here pretty much until January, February. Hopefully they calf about 9 months later. This type of cattle operation really isn't too hard. It's probably, of all the things that we do out here, it's probably the least
easiest?
labor intensive because they manage themselves. You have to check on them. You have to make sure fences aren't knocked down. You have to make sure that the well's pumping. You have to put mineral blocks out and things like that, protein tubs. But for the most part, they manage themselves. And, probably 3 times a year, the ranch is divided into 3 sections. They're each one's, 200 to 300 acres. They'll graze off an area and then we'll move them to another area. And so in another month, you'll have cattle basically right outside that fence. And young families love that. Their kids like watching the cows. That's become kind of a big attraction. But they'll graze everything off and then we'll move them back down into the shady part of the ranch by probably October timeframe, and they'll calf down there and start the cycle all over. They work really well with grain. A lot of people talk about the biodynamics and the diversified ranching, which has always made sense to me. When you look at agriculture in California, it's become very industrialized where people just do one thing.
Yes.
And I never liked that model. I always wanted to do something where I had multiple streams of income, first of all, but also the grain and the cattle are very complementary. When I've harvested the grain, I can run the cattle through and they can eat the stubble and eat whatever has fallen. The other thing that I didn't really bring up, but I haven't been too good at it yet, but is beekeeping. And so I got a grant also a year ago to get beneficial wildflowers planted so the cattle can graze those, things like vetch, stuff that the bees, when it's flowering, the bees can pollinate off it, get the nectar, the guests enjoy it. And then once it's warmed up and the flowers have died, that's something else I can just run the cattle through and the cattle can graze it off and start that cycle all over. I joke that I'm not a very good beekeeper. I'm more of a bee renter because I get the hives and they stick around for a year and then they leave. So I don't know. I haven't figured out how to get them to stay around for more than a year.
Well, beekeeping is so important. I was at the Burpee Center, which is in the Northeast, where, of course, they are one of the biggest seed sellers in the world, Burpee.
Right.
And their entire foundation now is for beekeeping. They're
really?
pouring so much money into protecting the bees. And funny enough, I happen to have a book right in front of me now. You can see it looks like a beehive, right? It's called The Beekeeper's Apprentice, and it has to do with Sherlock Holmes, who was a beekeeper. So, I mean, this has become a very popular issue, and I did not know that you were working on that. And congratulations on getting the grant. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about tourism in your area. You're in an area, as we said, has wineries, but you're also in an area that's very known for its food. The food is becoming a culinary destination. I first met you by accident because I was going to your ranch, but I stumbled upon your neighborhood, your friendly neighbors who do own a winery. And I'm putting them in our Travel Tuesday newsletter. I just wrote about them because they had such a nice day for the folks who belong to their wine club. So it is a wine and food destination above probably everything else. And it's wonderful to be able to light camp and then leave, go have a wonderful day at the wineries, the food, the hot springs, and then come back again and sleep under the stars. So that's really what this experience is. But we come back, I want to hear from somebody who lives there and what it's like to live there. So don't you guys go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you've been thinking about a cruise, I've definitely got you covered with Cruises It. Now, we have just become affiliated with them. And who are they? Well, Cruises It is the top agency for all the main cruise lines and some of the less known cruise lines as well. Cruises It has access to booking space that's been open years in advance, so you can get the best cabins. That's just number one. But they also make the prices lower. The cruise lines give Cruises It their own exclusive agency discounts. And if you're not from the cruise line, they have their own agency discounts that would apply as well. So you get both any discounts you would normally get on the cruise line, plus additional discounts that are given exclusively to cruises because they bring in so much business. On top of all those discount perks, when you book with them, you get the best rate guaranteed. And this is because Cruise Fair Watch system takes place. Now, what cruises it does is it tracks the pricing until the final payment date. So you keep in mind that to get the best rate guaranteed, you have to use my site. We have affiliated with them specifically. I sat down, I met with them in Tucson, Arizona. I met with Marianne Weather. We've now become good friends. She gave me a direct line, not only a link, which you can certainly use right away, but if you have questions, even a specific phone number. Cruises, it offers this not just to anyone that is one of our followers, but if you have friends and family, you can bring them in too. So just take a look at the show notes and you will see our dedicated phone line and our dedicated link. Happy sailing. So this is Adrienne Berg, and this is The Ageless Traveler, and thank you so much for being with us. You know that we offer you everything on our show notes, including how to ask me questions. If you have questions about anything you heard today, we have very generous guests. I'll be able to send those questions on to them, and they'll answer those questions, and you can do that very easily. You'll see on the show notes by sending a voicemail or a text. You'll see exactly how to do that so easily. So we're here today with Kenney Enney, and it's spelled Enney, but pronounced Enney, who is a rancher. He is a connoisseur of ancient grains. He raises barley for malt. He is now going to be a beekeeper, and he's an Airbnb owner and four actually, fabulous tenting experiences in coastal California. You live in this gorgeous place. I know you work very hard. You're up very early in the morning, but you do enjoy the area. The first time I saw you, you were drinking wine with your neighbors.
I always thought one reason I wanted to settle here is because I always thought it was one of the most beautiful places I had ever been to. I grew up in coastal Georgia, southeast Georgia, lived in Europe, lived in Asia, lived in South America, been to Australia, Africa, but I still think that this part of the country is from basically, Santa Maria up to Monterey, I still think is one of the most beautiful places in the world. There's still a bit of that pioneer spirit, which I like. What you stumbled onto last Saturday, that was a dinner for the wine club. But the Tackett family, they've been out here for probably 80 years or so. And while you were there, we were already planning the next sort of neighborhood barbecue. There are a couple little isolated neighborhoods where people have 20, 30 acre ranches, and Tackett's has kind of become sort of the meeting place. And you have wine. He usually has somebody that's playing music, or one of the neighbors plays music. But I kind of live in an isolated area, so I still like I still enjoy the peace and quiet. In the downtown area, particularly in the summertime, it gets pretty busy. You have concerts in the park every Thursday night. You'll have the Mid-State Fair that's going to start here in another couple of weeks, and you'll have big names, big performers come to that. You have the wine tourists that will come. So it is becoming a destination area. It makes, if you live in the downtown area, I would think it makes for somewhat of a chaotic at times living experience. But again, I'm away from that. If I get caught behind a tractor on the way into town, that's traffic. But sometimes downtown, you can't find places to park because everybody's there. But I can't think of anywhere else I would like to live. And I would never find another ranch like this.
Well, it is beautiful. And I will say that we took a whirlwind tour of Napa. We've been to all these places before, but because we're from the East Coast, not as much as most people from the West Coast. So to us, it's still new. And we went to Sonoma, we went to Napa, we went to Paso. And I will tell you, Paso for us is the one that stays in your heart. We found many places that, and I know, hold on to your hats, were $2,000 a night in parts of Big Sur and Carmel and and Napa. It can be very expensive. And of course, your tents are very, very reasonable. But the fact is that you're getting the same thing for a fraction of the cost. You're getting wonderful winery experiences, really farm to table food, friendly people, lovely stores of all types. And I brought home a little bit too much in olive oils. We didn't discuss olive oils. We didn't discuss balsamic vinegars because that's all that I eat. And I'll tell you, I had like a suitcase full of the other people bring wine. I buy oils and vinegars the way other people buy wine. So it's a wonderful place to shop too. So if any of you are listening from anywhere, including from Jordan, yeah, this is a great place to go, and you'll see how you can connect with Kenney and have a wonderful under the stars. And we'll finish with this. The new trend, and I write about this a lot, Kenney, is the dark sky experience. Now, this is not officially a dark sky experience. Plus, you keep lights out. So I want everyone to know that you could see here. You're not, you're not going to a national park where you can't see any lights or anything around you. You can. It's easy. But it's a beautiful sky. Do you do that personally, or do you stay in your beautiful ranch house? Do you ever go out and just enjoy the dark sky?
Couple times a week, probably, especially in the summertime. And, in another 3 weeks or so, the Perseids meteor shower is coming up. If you ever look at a light map of California, or actually of the United States, frankly, but if you look at a light map of California, you'll see all the way up the coast, you'll have light pollution up to right about Paso. And then there's a gap of about 100 miles of nothingness between Paso and Salinas. And so we're right on that edge. So when we look north, there's really nothing from Paso up to Salinas over to Fresno. And so it's a good area for stargazing and watching meteor showers. I like spotting satellites flying overhead. We do a lot of stargazing. The big one is the July-August Perseids and then the Leonids. But we sit out all the time. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I got out of the Marine Corps because I didn't want to have to go sit in another office. So,
well, you certainly don't sit in another office. And I want to thank you so much for being with us today. It's a real eye-opener for a lot of folks. It certainly was a wonderful experience for me. My plan, by the way, is I have very active kids who loved horse riding, which you have in the area. Everybody loves wine. And we'll be back. We'll be back as a family. So I thank you so much. And for everybody, you know that you can, for free, get our Travel Tuesday newsletter where you will be reading about this podcast. You'll be reading about how to use the hot springs in Paso. There's another type of wonderful experiences you can have there. They have really great hot springs, unusual in the way they've set them up. You'll be reading about wines and how to join a wine club, whether you should join a wine club, and of course, how to do wine tastings. So you get all of that, and that's just 1 week. We have a weekly newsletter called Travel Tuesday. So subscribe to that, listen to our podcasts, ask me questions, and you can do all of that. You'll see on our show notes. Go enjoy the Enney Ranch. You'll see how to do that on our show notes. And above all, go to agelesstraveler.com to access everything we offer and never stop traveling.